Hey everyone, we are on lesson 5.8, which is quadratic formula. I love the quadratic formula. I don't know why. I don't know. It's just a big formula that I like. Now, this is a method of finding the x-intercepts that always works. So all of the other methods that you learned, so factoring, taking square roots. There were another method that we actually didn't do this year called completing the square. But all of those methods are ways that you can find the x-intercepts. The quadratic formula works all the time when the other ones only work sometimes. So the quadratic formula, when you are looking at your quadratic, you got to make sure it's in standard form. So ax squared bx plus c equals 0. And then you have to figure out, well, what is your a, b, and c? And you're going to use this formula. Negative b, what's really x equals? Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And all of that, the whole thing, is over 2a. And once we plug it in, you're going to simplify. I don't want you typing in that whole thing into your calculator and getting a decimal answer. Sometimes you will have square roots or even imaginary numbers left in your answer. So we have to do it step by step. So take it one piece at a time. So number 1, let's start out by labeling our A, B, and C. And you may want to write kind of small. Don't write ginormous. So the A is the number in front of the x squared. If there's no number, we assume it's a 1. My B is the number in front of the x. So it's 2. And my C would be negative 63. And then I'm going to plug into the formula. Negative b. That would be negative, my b is 2. Plus or minus the square root. Anytime you plug in a number, put that number in parentheses. So b squared minus 4ac. All over 2a. All right. So here's what we do. We don't just type that whole thing in the calculator. First off, we have negative 2. I can take out the parentheses. Plus or minus. Now, all I want you to type in on this next step is just the numbers that are under the square root. Don't actually type in the square root symbol. Because if the numbers you get aren't a perfect square, it's going to give you a decimal answer. It's not going to just simplify the radicals like we learned a few lessons ago. So you have to kind of do that on your own. So you'll have the square root of some number. So all you're typing in is 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 63. And we get 256. All over 2 times 1 is 2. Now we lucked out and we got one where we had a perfect square. So the 256 is a perfect square. So that simplifies to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 256 is 16. All over 2. It won't always be that you get a nice whole number there. That might have been the square root of 200, which does not give me a nice whole number. All right, and then you'll notice there's a plus or minus. There is no plus or minus button in your calculator. You actually have to do this 2 separate times. Once with the plus, once with the minus. -2 plus 16 divided by 2. -2 plus 16 is 14. Divided by 2 is 7. So that's one of the x-intercepts. -2 minus 16 divided by 2. That would be -18 divided by 2, which is -9. That's the other x-intercept. So if your answers, if they come out to nice, neat numbers, then you have to actually do all of the math. We'll see examples where it doesn't simplify all the way, and so you may not have to do it all the way. All right, number 2, you'll notice it's not set equal to 0. So we have to subtract the 4x from both sides and add 15. To get -2x squared minus 1x plus 15. So you can't do quadratic formula until everything is on the same side. So my A is -2, B is -1, C is 15. All right, so now we have negative B. My B is -1, so I see I did negative and then my -1 plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC. And all of that is over 2A. So go ahead and make sure you have all of that correct. Make sure you have parentheses, or anytime you put in an A, B, or C, parentheses go with it. All right, so -1. That's +1. Plus or minus the square root. Only this. We're only going to type in that right there. -1 squared. Make sure the -1 is in parentheses. Minus 4 times -2 times 15. And we get 121. Oops. All over. So I typed that in. And then 2 times -2 is -4. Got lucky again. We had 1 plus or minus 11. The square root of 121 is 11 over -4. So now I'm going to get my 2 answers. I have to do 1 plus 7 divided by -4. That's 12 divided by -4, which is -3. So that's one of the x-intercepts. The other one, 1 minus 11 divided by -4. That would be -10 divided by -4, which is 2.5. Number 3. This one we've got to subtract the 1. So it becomes negative x squared plus 2x minus 1 equals 0. So my A is negative 1, B is 2, C is negative 1. So let's plug into the formula. Negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. And all of that is over 2A, or 2 times negative 1. So I'm going to do just the negative 2 plus or minus the square root. And we're just going to type that in. Remember, you're not putting in the square root symbol. So just 2 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 1, which is 0. I'll keep doing that. Over 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So this is really negative 2 plus or minus 0 over negative 2. So if you get a 0 there, you're not going to get a different answer regardless if you add it or subtract it. So you really don't need to do this twice. Negative 2 plus 0 divided by negative 2. If you go and do that with a minus sign, you're going to get the same answer. So this is really negative 2 divided by negative 2, which is 1. So anytime that you have just one x-intercept, remember that's where your parabola is just sitting on there. So your vertex is at this point, is at the x-intercept. All right, number 4. This one we need to subtract 10x to move it over. So it becomes 8x squared minus 10x equals 0. This one you could do the GCF. You could factor out the GCF and do it that way. You might save you a little time. But I still want to show it to you with quadratic formula. So my A is 8, B is negative 10, and C is 0. If there's not just some other number over there, we just assume it's 0. So we have negative B, so negative 10, plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC, all over 2A. All right, so negative 10 is positive 10, plus or minus square root. Now we need to type that in our calculator. So negative 10 in parentheses, make sure you do parentheses, squared minus 4 times 8 times 0. And that gives us 100 divided by 16. So this is 10 plus or minus 10 divided by 16. All right. So we have 10 plus 10 divided by 16. So 10 plus 10 is 20 divided by 16 is 1.25. And then we have 10 minus 10 divided by 16. 10 minus 10 is 0. Divided by 16 is 0. So all of these that we've done so far give us nice, neat numbers. Now we're going to go on to some, and I think these might not give us the best numbers to work with. So, first off, I need to subtract the 4x. So it becomes x squared minus 4x minus 9 equals 0. Make sure you always write it in this order. Your x squared first, then your x, then just your number. Our a is 1, b is negative 4, c is negative 9. So then plugging into my formula, negative, my b is negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So plugging in all of those numbers, all of that is over 2a. Negative 4. That's a positive 4. Plus or minus. Now I'm going to type that in that's under the square root. So negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 9. And I get 52. All of that is over 2. So 52 is not going to give us a nice whole number. If you type in square root of 52, you're going to get an ugly decimal. So this is where we have to go back to simplifying radicals. Square root of 52. We're looking for the largest perfect square that goes into 52. So if you start taking 52 and dividing that by your perfect squares, you're going to get 4. 4 and 13. And we know we have plus or minus 2 radical 13. So I'm going to take that 2 radical 13 and replace it where I have square root of 52. So 4 plus or minus 2 square root of 13 all over 2. Now these questions, we're not going to get just a number as our answer. We're going to leave it as this form. However, we need to look at these 3 numbers and see if I can divide those 3 numbers by anything. And all 3 of those numbers I could divide by 1. So this becomes 2 plus or minus 1 radical 13 all over 1. Which is just 2 plus or minus the square root of 13. And that's your final answer. So if you have a square root or an I left in your answer, which will be a majority of these quadratic formula problems, then you don't have to split it and do one with the plus, one with the minus, because we don't get those answers. All that you have to do is check to see if it can be simplified. All right, number 8. We're going to subtract 4 to get negative 8x squared plus 3 equals 0. So my A is -8. B, I don't have a term that's just x. So my B is 0. My C is 3. So quadratic formula, -b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac. All of that is over 2a. All right, -0, that's just 0. We don't even have to write that. So we have plus or minus the square root. Now let's type in 0 squared minus 4 times -8 times 3. That gives me 96. All of that is over -16. All right, 96. Square root of 96. All right, 96 divided by 49. No. 96 divided by 36. No. 96 divided by 25. No. 96 divided by 16. Yes. This is 16 and 6, which is 4 radical 6. So I have plus or minus 4 radical 6 over -16. Now here's the thing. If you have a negative in the denominator, in an example like this, that plus or minus actually does everything it needs to. You don't have to write that -16. If you write it, it's not going to be wrong, but your answer choices, like if it was a multiple choice, that negative probably wouldn't be there. And so I don't want you to think that it's wrong if the negative is not there, because that plus or minus kind of takes care of all of that. So if you have the negative, if you don't have the negative in the denominator, it's okay. All right, so this 4 and the 16, we can divide both of those by 4, leaving us with plus or minus 4 divided by 4 is just 1. So we have square root of 6 over 4. And that's the final answer. All right, number 9. Let's subtract 4x. Subtract 5. That gives us 5x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 0. All right, my A is 5. B, -4. C. So in my formula, -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so this becomes positive 4 plus or minus the square root. All right, let's type that in. -4 squared. Make sure the -4 is in parentheses. Minus 4 times 5 times 4. And we get -64 all over 10. Now, -64, square root of that, we're going to have I. So this becomes 4 plus or minus 8i all over 10. If you didn't know where that 8i came from, you may need to go back to the last lesson and review some of that. Now we look at the 4, the 8, and the 10 to see if they can all simplify in any way. And all of those numbers are divisible by 2. So this becomes 2 plus or minus 4i over 5. Last question, we need to subtract the 8. So it becomes negative x squared plus 10x minus 8 equals 0. The a is negative 1, b is 10, c is negative 8. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So this gives us negative 10 plus or minus the square root. We need to type all of that in. 10 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 8. We get 68 all over negative 2. Now 68 is not a perfect square, so we're going to have to simplify it. We want to know the largest perfect square that goes into 68. And if you start taking 68 divided by 49 or divided by 36, 25, 16, you got to go all the way down to 4. It's 4 times 17. 4 is the only one that's going to give you a whole number. We get 2 radical 17. So this is negative 10 plus or minus 2 radical 17 all over negative 2. But remember, I said you don't really have to put the negative in the denominator. And then we're going to look to see if those numbers can be simplified in any way. And they're all divisible by 2. So negative 5 plus or minus radical 17. Because if we divide by 2, the 2's turn into 1. All right, I know this was a lot, and we will continue to do more practice with these. If you have any questions, let me know.